Have you noticed? Empty words make up so much of what we hear nowadays. Words that have been used so often in so many different situations that they have become meaningless. Some people are particularly good at using empty words, so much so that they can perhaps make a living out of it. One empty word leads to another empty word, numbing the audience into unquestioning acceptance. A man who is particularly good at putting together empty words is Philip Lindholm, who is standing for Lakewood City Council. Philip Lindholm recently put out a video of an interview with Lakewood Mayor Jason Whalen, who has given Lindholm his endorsement. One favour deserves another, and in the video description, Lindholm hails Whalen as a fearless, tireless leader. In a world of empty words, this is the ultimate accolade. But do we have to accept this vacuousness at face value? Can we move beyond the emptiness and find real meaning? Indeed, what is a fearless leader? And on the basis of his record, does Jason Whalen deserve this description? I am from England, a country rich in history and battles. Nearly 1,000 years ago, in 1066, England was being invaded by both the Vikings and the Normans. When news came that the Vikings were landing in northeast England, the English king, Harold, rushed up there with his army and defeated the enemy. But he had no time to savour his victory. News came of a Norman invasion, and Harold had to rush to the other side of the country. At the Battle of Hastings, against the Normans, he met the enemy and was personally in the thick of the battle, a fearless, tireless leader. Unfortunately, he died at the battle. An arrow went into his eye. The Normans went on to win this battle and conquered his kingdom. But Harold showed himself ready to risk everything for his people. Another leader who defended his people was Mahatma Gandhi, who stood against injustice, both in India and South Africa. Having trained as a lawyer in London, he went to South Africa and actively worked and organised against racial discrimination. Then he went back to India and campaigned for independence from British rule. Being a fearless leader, he wasn't afraid of imprisonment, and he stuck to his principles, not just as a patriotic Indian, but as someone who believed that different communities of different religions could live together. And perhaps because he fearlessly kept to his principles, he was assassinated by a Hindu nationalist in 1948, less than 6 months after his country's independence. Talking about South Africa, there is Nelson Mandela, who devoted his life to the struggle against apartheid. In fact, he spent nearly 3 decades in prison for his beliefs. And all the while, he was being a fearless leader, inspiring his millions of followers in South Africa and around the world. Moving to Europe, there was Sophie Scholl. She was born in Germany in 1922 and came from a relatively prosperous family. As a teenager in the 1930s, she organised against the Nazi regime and at the age of 16 had her first run-in with the Gestapo. As a student at Munich University, she continued to show leadership through involvement with the White Rose movement. For example, distributing flyers criticising the government. That is real leadership. A girl in her early 20s pitting herself against the full power of the Nazi state. In the end, she was arrested and was put on trial for her life. Perhaps if she had apologised or put the blame onto others, she could have saved her neck. But being a fearless leader, she held firm, and she told the court that somebody, after all, had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare express themselves as we did. Fearless leadership, which led to her execution by guillotine. If you are American, you will, of course, appreciate the fearless leadership of the Founding Fathers, and in particular, George Washington. It would probably have been easiest to accept the status quo. You're a subject of a British crown, but you can go about your daily life without too much trouble. Yet, fearless leaders have principles. For example, the principles of liberty and self-determination. In George Washington's case, he fought for those principles and took the risk of being hanged for sedition. Which brings us to Jason Whalen, the fearless, tireless leader. Is he really someone in the tradition of Gandhi, Mandela, and George Washington? As mayor of Lakewood, he has shown leadership during city council meetings, in the sense that he keeps control and allows city business to progress smoothly. But that's not the real test of a leader. A leader stands up for the interests of those he or she purports to lead. A civic leader, a mayor, isn't frightened off by the diktats of the state and the county, and doesn't allow themselves to fall prey to the manipulations of commercial interests. Jason Whalen has shown himself to be a weak leader, neither fearless nor tireless, and to be a man who is distinctly unwilling to risk his reputation or status, and certainly not his life or liberty. Remember the Tensler Library? Architecturally, it was one of the most important buildings in Lakewood, even a point of pride, because it had won a prestigious National Library Architecture Award. 1 year ago, it was demolished. No one at the City Council lifted a finger to save this building so central to Lakewood's civic pride, although someone like Whalen could have spearheaded a campaign to save it, for example, through threatening the Pierce County library system with de-annexation. Whalen let Tensler be destroyed without so much as a peep of protest. And then there's Lakewood's environment. During Whalen's time on the City Council, we've seen warehouse after warehouse go up, often wreaking irreparable environmental destruction while trashing entire neighbourhoods, some of Lakewood's poorest. Did Whalen rally the council to prevent the destruction of Garry Oaks and their woodlands, wetlands, floodplains and associated critical areas? Did Whalen show leadership by mobilising the council to do everything possible to prevent the horrible transformation of pleasant, green but poor neighbourhoods, graced by oaks hundreds of years old, into vast expanses of concrete, literal dead zones in Lakewood? Absolutely not. Because Whalen hasn't the courage to show real leadership, to put his own interests on the line. What matters to Jason Whalen is Jason Whalen, and in the end, his position of Mayor of Lakewood was something that turned out to be a convenient stepping stone to his current job as City Attorney for Auburn. Given Jason Whalen's track record, one wonders why Philip Lindholm is so pleased about his endorsement. In any reasonable world, it should be a political kiss of death.